One hidden verse in Scripture reveals a battle so mysterious that heaven and hell seemed to stop and watch. Most people know how Moses lived, but almost nobody knows what allegedly happened after his death. And what's buried in that silence changes the way you read his entire story. The mystery nobody talks about. Why would Lucifer want the body of Moses? And maybe an even stranger question, why would heaven respond at all? Out of every person in Scripture, every prophet, every king, every moment of cosmic significance, the story lands here, on a mountain nobody can find, over a grave nobody was allowed to mark, in a confrontation nobody witnessed. What makes this feel so unsettling is that it appears in one brief, almost hidden reference, then disappears. No long explanation, no details, just a glimpse of something that happened between worlds. And this wasn't described as a battle with weapons or armies. No thunder, no force. Just a dispute, a claim, an argument over authority. One side saying mine, the other said no. And somehow, that changed everything. Moses' final moments on Mount Nebo. The mountain was quiet. No crowd, no ceremony. Just Moses standing on Mount Nebo, looking out across a land he had spent decades moving toward, but would never enter. Imagine that for a moment. You lead people through the impossible, through hunger and rebellion and miracles and years of desert silence, and then you stop, right at the edge. His life had moved in 3 completely different chapters. 40 years in Egypt, surrounded by power and palace. 40 years in Midian, forgotten, tending sheep in silence. Then 40 more carrying the weight of an entire nation through wilderness, water, and war. And Scripture says something striking about the end of it. Moses was 120 years old, but his strength had not faded. His eyes were still clear. This wasn't presented like a man collapsing under the weight of age. It felt different, like calling home. Like his story wasn't ending because he ran out of time, but because his assignment was complete. But what happened next, almost nobody expected. God personally buries Moses. Moses died without the things people usually remember. No public funeral, no national gathering, no monument raised into the sky. Instead, the account says God buried Moses. And then something even stranger. The location disappeared into silence. No marker, no shrine, no place for future generations to stand beside and remember. Why hide the grave? One interpretation pushes into an uncomfortable idea that maybe the burial was hidden to protect Israel from doing what people so often do, turning reverence into worship. A visible grave becomes a destination becomes a tradition becomes something else entirely. But there was another possibility in this story. Maybe the grave wasn't hidden because Moses was forgotten. Maybe it was hidden because something bigger was still unfolding. Why the hidden grave mattered. If the grave stayed hidden only to stop idolatry, that already feels significant. But there's another layer beneath it. Not just protection from worship, but protection of purpose. Because what if Moses' death wasn't being treated like an ending? What if heaven was guarding something unfinished? The mountain became more than a burial place. It became silent around something sacred. No witnesses, no location, no access. And that silence created tension, because heaven had sealed what happened there. But darkness noticed. And when something buried by God suddenly becomes contested, you know something bigger is coming. Lucifer arrives to claim the body. The valley didn't change all at once. It happened slowly. Light fading, the air is getting heavier. The kind of stillness that makes you feel like something is present before you actually see it. And Lucifer wasn't searching. He already knew where to go. That's what makes this moment feel different. This wasn't random. This wasn't curiosity. The story presents it as an intention, like a claim that had been waiting for the right moment. Why come for a body? Because in this interpretation, Moses represented more than a person. He represented the covenant, memory, leadership, legacy. The law itself carried through one man's hands for 40 years. And this is where things turn. The attempt wasn't simply to take a body, it was to corrupt what the body represented, to twist Moses' legacy, to take what people reverenced and redirect it towards something destructive. And then, right at the edge of the grave, everything was about to change. Michael steps between Lucifer and the grave. And this is where everything changed. The valley that had felt heavy suddenly felt divided. Darkness moved first, and then light answered. Not louder, not bigger, just a present. Michael arrived, not as someone chasing glory, but as someone standing where he had been sent to stand. No weapon described, no dramatic attack, just a line drawn. And Lucifer spoke his claim. Moses failed. He struck the rock. He disobeyed. He belongs to death. Imagine hearing that. Not praise erased by failure, but failure becoming the entire story. Every miracle forgotten, every decade of faithfulness is reduced to one moment of disobedience. That was the challenge. Not strength versus strength. Authority versus accusation. Lucifer's claim was simple. Moses had fallen. Therefore, Moses could be claimed. But Michael never stepped into debate. He didn't defend Moses' achievements. He didn't deny Moses' mistakes. He didn't argue the record. He stood between the accusation and the grave. And the battle stopped being about a body. It became about who had the right to speak the final word. The one sentence that ended the battle. And then came the moment everything had been building toward. Not a speech, not judgment, not anger. One sentence. The Lord rebukes you. That's it. Michael did not pronounce condemnation himself. He did not speak from personal authority. He didn't try to overpower Lucifer with stronger words or a louder voice. He handed the verdict upward. That changes the whole scene. Because this wasn't Michael proving he was stronger. It was Michael refusing to act as though he were the source of authority. And that ended the confrontation. No counterargument. No second challenge. Lucifer withdrew. Not because Michael won an argument, but because heaven's decree stood where accusation could go no further. Why Moses? But the question that stays is this. Why Moses? The first answer is covenant. Moses carried the law. He stood at the center of Israel's story as the one connected to Torah, obedience, and the presence of God. Corrupting Moses meant distorting everything he represented. Then comes glory. Moses had reflected divine presence so strongly that people physically noticed it. His face, his encounters, his story was permanently marked by what he had stood close to. And then, prophecy. Centuries later, Moses appears again, this time on a mountain in the New Testament, standing beside Jesus at the Transfiguration. His story didn't end at Nebo. It extended beyond death into something the disciples witnessed with their own eyes. So the body never just remains. It represented covenant, glory, and unfinished purpose. Why Michael? Now another question surfaces. Why Michael? Scripture places Michael consistently in moments of conflict, protection, and spiritual contest. Daniel presents him as a chief prince connected with struggle over nations. Revelation describes him leading against the dragon. But the striking detail here isn't power, it's restraint. Michael didn't act independently. He didn't curse. He didn't elevate himself above the confrontation or speak from his own strength. He appealed to God. That's what makes this moment different from every other angelic encounter in Scripture. Michael wasn't heaven's hero acting alone. He was heaven's servant, carrying authority that was never his own. The lesson that stays. And maybe this is why people still talk about this story. Not because of hidden graves, not because of angelic warfare, but because accusations still feel familiar. The voice that reduces a person to their worst moment. That takes decades of faithfulness and points only at the failure. That says fallen means finished. That says mistake means forfeited. Moses never saw this battle. Heaven acted while he knew nothing about it. That idea stays with people. That protection isn't always visible. That authority doesn't always sound loud. That the final word doesn't always belong to the loudest voice in the room. And when identity feels threatened, when accusation feels louder than truth, the response isn't always to fight harder. Sometimes it's simply remembering who holds the verdict. The battle over Moses' body became a story about more than a hidden grave. It became a story about authority, protection, and who ultimately speaks last. Whether read as mystery, symbolism, or spiritual reality, one declaration never changed. The Lord rebukes you.